The good old clap, take one.
That's right.
How many of you knew what you wanted to be when you were 7 years old? I did. I wanted to be world champion.
Hey, is there honesty involved in this podcast? Can we be honest?
You can shut your fucking lips.
And then I'll just say, put them up, what? Let's go.
He's like, you look too pretty on the wave. Get ugly.
We can talk about DMT if you want.
I thought we were boxing.
All right, we are back, and we have a current cast member of the new Disney Plus series, Chasing Waves, Sara Kohrogi. Thank you so much for joining us on the lineup today.
Oh my gosh, thank you, Dave, for having me. I'm super stoked to be here.
Where we're doing this remotely, so where are you calling in from?
I'm calling in from the South Bay, Hermosa Beach, California. So I'm not too far from, I think, the WSL headquarters in Santa Monica. And I heard that you're up north, so I spend a lot of time up there too. So we're kind of in the same area.
Yeah, it's all Southern California. Although when you grow up in Southern California, I think you think like Santa Barbara is like Northern California, and you're like, oh no, it's all like one big space.
I was just on the phone with my friend. I was like, yeah, I'm going to NorCal. And then she was like, where? I was like, Santa Barbara. She goes, that's not NorCal.
It's not even Central Cal. I went to UCSB and had this. I grew up in Southern California and was like, yeah, I'll probably need like a 6'10". I'll probably be using that a few times a week at 12 to 15 foot Rincon, and it's a great north. And you get up there and you're like, man, my geography was so messed up before I got up here.
Totally.
How is the we've had the bomb cyclone hitting, and there was like evacuations in Montecito last night, and so much rain and so much swell. How's it been down there for you?
It's been good, kind of crazy. Like, you know, I got back actually from the mountains just a few days ago. And so I came back the day before the swell hit, and I've been kind of shocked. I was like, whoa, I didn't expect it to get this big.
Right.
I've been actually kind of avoiding the water because, I don't know, it's been super stormy and rainy, and I don't really want to get sick right now. I'm worried about that. And, you know, I'm seeing some pictures of my friends just getting insane waves here in the South Bay. Like almost, you know, you never see waves like this here. So I'm like itching to get out there, but it's just push and pull between like, is it safe to go out? Is the water clean? We don't know. Like, you know, so I've just been more of a spectator these past couple days.
It's been interesting because there's just been so much swell, and you know, as you said, like I feel like the older I get, the more like when I was young, I'm like, yeah, but what's being sick gonna do to me? And now I'm like, with kids and a job and like a dog and a mortgage, I'm like, I can't get sick. I don't want to do it.
Totally.
But there's been like so much swell. It does feel like I've got a few friends down the South Bay area, and it's been huge, but it does feel like it's been one of those little nooks and crannies that's handled it in a way where you could probably get some waves. But then I won't spoil it with the name of this person, but essentially a Rincon fixture who is there every day, dominates the lineup, surfs so well, surfs it rain or shine, et cetera, et cetera. It's just like part of their identity. Texted me, I think last Thursday, and was like, where are we surfing this week? And I'm like, man, I don't know. Like, it's going to be gigantic here in Oxnard, and like there'll be a few, like all those points north will be okay, but they're probably going to be, you know, so many people. And this person wrote back and said, I'm actually going to Mammoth, which shocked me. But they basically made the same point. They're like, the water's going to be insane. There's going to be 1,000 people out there. And I've seen some amazing waves, but I also have kind of thought like, that just feels like it's been so much work to get one of those. And I probably wouldn't have been the one getting it. So I'm kind of okay with not having like chased my tail for a few days of swell.
Yeah, for sure.
So, well, it's interesting. Like, so our producer, Miguel Clemente, put us in touch, but you and I have crossed paths before. I remember, I think I met you, or didn't meet you, but encountered you during that final kind of casting session for ABC's The Ultimate Surfer. You were there at the hotel for those 3 days, right?
Yes, I totally was. It's such a small world.
It was weird, and I was just gonna say, like, I remember because I was kind of a consulting producer on some of the casting at the start, and they're like, come on in, it's gonna be a couple hours, we're gonna meet the final cast. They didn't give me a lot of details, and I remember, I mean, you know, if I should be talking about this, but whatever. I remember coming into that big sort of casting couch room with all the the lights and the cameras and trying to sit in the back, and they're like, no, you have to sit up here, and here's your menu for the day, and here's your, file on everybody, all 24 of the remaining castmates,
Wow.
and we're going to be here for the whole day. And I'm like, what? Like, what is this? And I remember you coming on, but what was your experience like over those 3 days? Because I heard some interesting things from the cast members.
Oh my gosh, that was a very interesting. So you were in that room then with like all the people sitting there, and when they had the camera up.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So how do I start this? The way I got into the show was, I think, a very interesting story and very special to me, actually. It was kind of a turning point in my life. I was on North Shore, I was surfing, and I saw who else but the best, Kelly Slater, out in the lineup. And, we both kind of have a similar condition with our spines, and we have like a scoliosis, like a curvature in our spine. So I just was always curious about like kind of how he dealt with his career having this like physical, I don't like to call it disability, but it's just something that is definitely a challenge to deal with. So I kind of came up to him, I was like, hey, Kelly. And he kind of looked at me, he was like, I don't know you, but like he was so sweet. He was like, hi. And I was like, I know you don't know me, but my name's Sarah. Like, I heard you had scoliosis. Like, I just was curious how you've been handling this throughout your career. I mean, he's like 50 now, I think, or almost 50. And, he's still surfing so amazing. So I want to be like that. And so he was like kind of taken aback by that question. And we just kind of hit it off from there. So we're just chatting. And then he came out of the water with me. My dad's on the beach freaking out because he's a huge fan of Kelly Slater. And then, like, long story short, he's like, hey, like, why don't you try out for my show? So that's how I ended up there that day. And it was weird. It was COVID, and it was like the weirdest thing. You couldn't leave your room. Like they
Right.
threw you in these separate rooms, and they're like, you can't leave, you can't do this, you can't do nothing, you can't talk to the other cast members. It was like, I was like, oh my gosh, this is kind of like a little bit of like a prison for 3 days. But I was so excited to kind of have like almost my first big break, because I was never really in the surf industry from a young age. So like to be somewhere that was going to be shown on ABC, to get to surf the ranch for a month, and even like get a chance for the CT. Like I was like, whoa, what the heck? How did this kind of like plop into my lap? And so I was super stoked on that. And of course, like I'm seeing the other cast members there, and here and there, like we'll sneak a conversation in the elevator, or like, but like there'll be times where like we'd like, oh no, there's like somebody there, like we can't talk right now. Like it just felt
Right.
like, like almost like camp, where when you're younger and the boys and girls are separated, and like
Right.
late at night you sneak out to hang out or something. So it was fun. It was definitely like something I've never done before. And it was like the beginning of me kind of feeling comfortable, maybe like pursuing like TV or like being on some sort of show. I started to think, wow, I really genuinely felt energized by this process. So hopefully something else comes my way.
Well, and that's an interesting way to put it, because obviously something else did. This is going to air after the launch of your show on Disney Plus, Chasing Waves, and that was kind of, it looks like from the synopsis, it was sort of filmed in the lead up and in and around the Tokyo Games. So I'd imagine there wasn't a ton of daylight between that experience of going through the casting process for Ultimate Surfer and starting with Chasing Waves. How did you get involved with this project?
So here's another, I mean, it's hard to explain, because this is another thing that just kind of fell into my lap. So I love to say like, there's like fate, and it's very like serendipitous or something like that, like how I'm being approached to be on these like shows and these opportunities. What happened with Ultimate Surfer, like just I ended up being an alternate, and I got injured, so I couldn't even participate at all. But at that moment I thought, wow, it's done. Like that was my chance. And then I just took a big breath, and I was like, you know what, if something's gonna be meant to be, it'll come in. And so I ended up going to Japan after I graduated from school, and living out there and just surfing the Japanese circuit. And I wasn't even in the pro circuit at the time. I was surfing the amateur circuit, because my vision was to like move to Japan, get rooted in the culture, kind of like do like an international business type thing and kind of surf on the side for fun. And so I was doing the amateur league and I ended up winning that year for that league. And I didn't know this at the time, but the winner of the league that year gets put on the national team for an opportunity for the Olympics. So it just kind of like boom, boom, boom again, kind of took off. And then it was so weird. I got an email from one of the commissioners from the league and they're like, hey, like, do you mind if we connect you with this person? They want to do a little documentary series and on Japanese surfers. And so I'm like, yeah, sure. Me thinking like it's going to be, you know, something small, like, or, you know, like on YouTube or I don't know. I was very low expectation. And so I did, I got connected with them, did a little quick interview with them. They're like, okay, we'll keep in touch. Had another interview, like, so I was approached maybe in like the end of the year, fall, winterish, and then had another interview in February. And that's when they kind of revealed to me like, oh, this is going to be for a very big production, like a very big streaming platform. And we can't tell you much, but kids and families and all ages love it. So I'm like thinking in my head, I'm like already like, it has to be Disney. Like they didn't tell me, but I just had this gut feeling like they're not going to say kids like it if it's, you know. So then like it was super interesting because the interview process, I was in Puerto Rico at the time, and I pulled up the camera just like to do the Zoom interview with, you know, all the producers were there, and then it just goes and Puerto Rico blackout.
Right. Yeah.
So I was like, wow, I'm missing my opportunity again. Like I had this interview set up. It's the final interview to get on the show. I was like super hyped. And then I just like panicked. I was like, oh my gosh, like the whole city's blacked out. I can't get internet, no connection, whatever. And luckily I was able to reschedule to the next day. And a friend of mine their family was so kind to let me do it at their house. They had a generator and everything. So we did the interview, and then they finally revealed like, oh, this is going to be like on Disney Plus, and you know, we plan to be following you for a year or so and see where it goes. So it was like, I was like, woo! I was not expecting that, but I was extremely excited.
And it seems like such a transformative opportunity because as you were talking about, you're like, you know, I'm finishing school, I'm thinking about what I'm doing in my career. You know, I had this, the Ultimate Surfer casting experience. So I'm going to go to Japan. I'm doing the national circuit. And then to have something like a Disney Plus show come in and whether this was the intention or not at the start, like the product seems to be almost the like singular story of surf culture in Japan, you know, in and around the Tokyo Games. And, you know, as surfers like Mahina Maeda and Yuma Takunuki and yourself, Kanoa Igarashi, Connor O'Leary, like this cross section of modern talent, and coming at it from different places. So in a way, I'm interested to hear if that kind of opportunity at the beginning, as it was being presented to you, is sort of like, great, this is going to guide what I'm doing for the next, you know, X amount of months.
Totally. And so it was super interesting because at the time I was sponsored and working with this company in Japan. So like it was really cool. Some companies, like how it works there is they'll hire you as an employee, and then like half my job was to surf, and then half of it was to like help them with their international, like America facing teams.
Right.
So I was perfect. I was like, oh, this is exactly what I want to do. Perfect. And then after I didn't qualify for the Olympics, they kind of like changed my sponsorship to be a little bit more skewed towards work and a little less surf. And I remember thinking, wow, this is a really tough decision to make because I just feel like if I want to pursue surf, I have this body now, you know? And so why would I like give it up just yet? I'm just like on this, I'm just getting going. You know, I just graduated college, like I just started, and look how far I've come. So imagine if I just put more time and energy into it, like where I could go. And then so I let go. I unfortunately had to let go of the job and the sponsorship, and I decided to move back to America. And when I did, I was, no joke, I was boarding the plane and I got the call from the producers, and they're like, because it was COVID during the time, so we didn't know like if it was going to start, when it was going to start, what was going on. I hadn't heard of them since February, and at this time it was May. So, you know, like it's just, and I got the text and it was like, hey, like, where are you? We're ready to shoot. And I was like, oh, I'm on a flight back to LA. And they're like, perfect. We can't shoot anyone right now because of COVID, but we could shoot you because you're in LA. And I was like, wow, this is such a gift. So it definitely, like, I was so lucky to come home. My parents are extremely supportive of like anything I want to do, which is something I'm so grateful for. And they're like, you know what? This is a huge opportunity. Let's give it 100%. Let's give it everything you got and just do this for now. And I was like, all right.
It's interesting too, because as we were saying, the show is going to come out, but it has all these different kind of bites at the surfing apple, so to speak. You've got someone like Mahina, who was an Olympian. You've got, someone like Kanoa, who is competing for a world title, and Connor O'Leary, who's returning to the championship tour and surfing so well. I think probably the series chronicled him when he was on the Challenger Series. And then, someone like yourself who's competing on the domestic circuit in Japan, and someone who's actually graduated from a university, which is pretty rare for surfers of your caliber, And so it does sound like it's a really broad cross-section of people who are approaching professional surfing. Is that fair?
That's definitely fair to say. I think the vision with the documentary, from my understanding, was to just kind of outline like Japanese culture and Japanese surf culture and almost like the history of it. So starting from like the trailblazers all the way leading up to like our modern day surfers, which ends up being the crew, like the main crew that you were naming earlier, Connor, Kanoa, Mahina, Yuma. And so it's super interesting because they have so many side stories from all these OG legends in Japan, like that have actually like been there forever, that maybe have never gotten recognition for what they've done. And then it also like mixes such a cool like blend of culture, because in my opinion, surf culture and Japanese culture are similar, but also very, very different in so many ways. I mean, surf is so radical at times, and Japanese culture is so traditional, and it's really cool. It like kind of like paints that picture as well, like to see how that fits in. And like, obviously, I think there's also a lot of connection between the two, just because like there's so much energy involved. Japanese people are very energy sensitive, and like surfing is like really all about like reading the water, reading the waves, and like being immersed in like this power called the ocean. So like I'm super excited to see it, and to be completely honest, I have no idea what it's gonna turn out like, because they haven't shown me anything. But from what I know and from what we shot, like I think it's gonna be somewhere along the lines of like all that stuff.
It's really cool, and I'm really looking forward to watching it. I haven't seen it yet myself, but the just the idea of going deep into a kind of surfing culture that has historically not had a ton of attention on the world stage. And I mean, I'm coming at it from, my mom's Australian, I grew up in Southern California, but really like the surf industry has been so Western minded for so long, and whether it's sort of sponsorships or whether it's, competition results, or both in a lot of ways, free surfing, video parts, whatever, it's been radically dominated, arguably, by, North America, Hawaii, and Australia for so long. Totally. Even to the point that when, something like the Brazilian storm began happening, I think a lot of pundits in sort of Western surfing society were not giving it the kind of respect it deserved, because they hadn't really been eyes open to what that culture was doing for so long, that kind of paved the way for this Brazilian dominance. And I'd say most of the pundits are still kind of caught flat-footed by how it happened, and a lot of that is really just kind of keeping your eyes closed to, hey, this is a global sport, and there are pockets of development happening in these places that have the infrastructure, they have the community, and they have the talent, they have the waves, and you'll get blindsided if you're not paying attention to it. So I love the idea that something like that's happening with this documentary in Japan.
Totally. And with surfing, like progressing and becoming an Olympic sport, especially like debuting in Japan, like, there's a lot of things culturally where it requires parents to be on board in order for their children to pursue it. And before, surfing may have not been looked at so seriously as that mainstream sport, but like having it be in the Olympics, having it be like come more high level, we're seeing a lot more talented, like very, very young, like obviously we saw it in the skating, like skate, surf, snow. I think there's many talented like Japanese athletes out there. So I'm super excited to see what it does. And like, hopefully it gives them a bigger platform too, because it's been there for years, but I know it hasn't been marketed as much. And also I think the mentality there is still very rooted in, it's a very testing culture. Like they like to test, like even for me to enter the amateur league, I had to do 5 tests. The first test was like, can she paddle? Wow. And then you rank. And then it was like, can you duck dive next? Can you stand up? Like, it's crazy. So they made me test to even get in. And so I think their mind is so focused on like kind of competition results, like getting those like numbers, so to say, that they sometimes lose sight on how to like grow the sport globally and like get that exposure. I kind of like would love to be a really like, I don't know, help in like a force pushing that forward, just because of my international background and like kind of my education and stuff.
Yeah, and it's fascinating too, right? Because surfing as a community and culture has sort of traditionally fancied itself as progressive nonconformist, although I'd argue how valid that is across a lot of people that I know. But, this idea that it's like, oh, yeah, this is like a fringe activity that has attracted, outcasts and outliers and free thinkers and pioneers, all of which is like really appealing, and actually really appealing in a marketing sense for a lot of countries as well. But then it's that weird kind of like, this is small and special. It's getting more attention. It's becoming more mainstream. It's becoming more professional in a lot of ways. And that tension point between the kind of roots of it, which are anti-establishment, which, look, I work for the World Surf League, but I started surfing because it was like, I'm going to run away and join the circus. Like, this seems much better than suburbia. And then kind of bridging that tension of like, yeah, that's part of the DNA, but it's also something that is now being taken very, very seriously from an industry standpoint, from a media standpoint, from a mainstream global standpoint. And to your point, having it become an Olympic sport and cultures like Japanese culture starting to take it more seriously as a sport.
Totally. So, I'm hoping, I totally when I first went to Japan, I was like, oh my gosh, I want to start a surf resort here, like grow this area, do this, do that. And then as I, really rooted myself in those communities, I found, my heart couldn't really handle thinking about overpopulating and gentrifying these like small surf towns where these guys they're people I love and care about and I've really connected with, and they can't afford to like leave that area. So they only have that wave. Like they're not like, fortunate like me or other pro surfers or other even Americans who have the resources to go travel, go to Mexico, go to Hawaii, go to Indo. They're from a small countryside and they happen to grow up with this absolutely beautiful wave. And so I've definitely struggled like internally thinking about how to protect them, yet like you see them struggling economically too, So it's like how to balance those two has definitely been something I've been working on the past few years.
Well, it's interesting. We're gonna talk more about that in this next segment. But by the time this does come out, I will have binged all 8 episodes of Chasing Waves on Disney Plus. I hope everyone that listens to this does the same. And you're actually having a premiere party on Saturday, January 21st at the MNML Golf Club in Redondo Beach. And if people want to attend that and they're listening to this, which will be airing before that, how can people get a ticket to go to that?
I would totally, if anyone's in the South Bay and in the area, like please feel free to reach out on Instagram and message me and I'll send you the invite link. I would love to see, more people there, the better in my opinion. It's just going to be like a really big celebration kind of like these couple years work. And hopefully some of the people who worked on the production will also be there. I just kind of want to, it's almost like a big thank you and like just, to everyone who put in the work for this project. So just hit me up on Instagram if you're in the South Bay or in the area and want to come, and I'll get you the info.
I love it. We're going to take a quick break to get a word in from our sponsors, and we'll be right back. Well, so I know that Chasing Waves is going to dive pretty deep into your background, so we won't spoil those episodes here. But broadly, you know, where did you come from? Where were you born and raised? Mom, dad, siblings? What was your sort of early life like?
So I was born and raised in Hermosa Beach, California. You know, I went to Maricosta High School and I did the surf team there. But let's just rewind a little bit more. It was weird. I wasn't really a water person. I was more of a land sports girl. So I played baseball, basketball, soccer, tennis, and then I wanted to be a professional golfer. So that I was kind of pursuing that very seriously. And then I had been diagnosed with scoliosis. So that's how the surfing came into my life. My mom, you know, she's like one of my best friends. I think it'll be shown you'll see it in the show, but we're very, very close, and I'm super fortunate to have her as a big support in my life. She's like everything I've done, she's been there for me. My dad, he's the reason I started surfing. He works in baseball, but yeah, he never played baseball. He was a surfer his whole life. So that's kind of how I got into it. And yeah, I did surfing all throughout high school, really enjoyed that. And I had that opportunity to take that gap year. And I thought, you know, if I wanted to be a professional surfer, like this is the time to do it. I'm young, you know, I kind of have some skill, I think, at this point. So let's see. And my parents gave me that option. And I don't know, I've always been super academic. So when I got into Berkeley, I just really had to dig deep and be like, why am I going to college? Like, what is the purpose? Like, what can I do? And you know, I ended up I decided to go straight into school because I was kind of...
You didn't take a gap year? I
didn't take a gap year. I was honestly afraid that if I had, I wouldn't end up going to school just because getting a taste of like life and freedom outside of the school system is, you know, I'm very appreciative of the school system, yet like being out of it, I'm like, wow, it's very liberating. It's very free. It's very... you know, it's very different. So I was just so scared, like knowing myself at that time, I was like, if I take this gap year, I might not come back. So why don't I just go straight into it?
Well, and that's interesting too, because, you know, there's not like a deluge of surfing content of you online, but what is there is you're a very high level surfer. Like, And so you're just teasing everyone that really wants to watch you surf in a way, because I'm like, I'll see more waves. But I guess my question is, so you're playing all these sports, like it sounds like some of them you were playing at a pretty high level, like golf and potentially pursuing that. You switch gears in part because of the diagnosis with your back. But I'd imagine that if you were actually considering taking a gap year, there was something in your brain where you thought, well, I could probably do this. Like, were you doing high school contests? Were you doing any sort of pro juniors or QSs early on? What was it looking like in terms of how the idea of potentially being a professional surfer to the point where you would consider taking a gap year formed in your head? How'd that happen?
So I had been competing. I was doing like WSA. I don't think it exists anymore, but we're doing that. We're doing NSSA. I was doing it on the scholastic side and on like the personal side. And then I was doing the Prime series. So those were like kind of, you know, every weekend was a contest, and I was really committed to the sport, like competitively. And I ended up like winning, I think, California champ for the scholastic series my junior year or something, maybe my sophomore year, and, you know, finals and nationals and in the state championships always. So I always thought I had like, you know, a chance if I really wanted to go for it. And yeah, I had little sponsors here and there, like the local surf shop sponsored me, and you know, I had like a little sunglass sponsor and a bikini sponsor. So it being like from the age of like 14 to 17, it was, you know, really exciting at that time. And I thought, oh, maybe I have a shot at this.
It's interesting, like, because it's something that, like, in my day job is head of strategy for this company, working with someone like Jessie Miley Dyer, who's the head of the sport, like stabilizing the tours and competition framework at every level is so important. And it's something that it's pretty fresh for the ASP WSL. It's only kind of started to happen in the last couple of years. And even once our systems are stabilized, like creating stability at the amateur ranks as well is really important, because having come up through that system as well and knowing so many people that did, and it's so easy to get lost because, as you pointed out, it's like, I don't even know if WSLSA is still doing events, and compared to other sports, right, it doesn't have that really crystallized structure of like, okay, I want to be a professional football player, I'm going to do Pop Warner and then high school, and I'm going to go to these like training academies, and I want to play at a D1 school, and maybe now I'm going to use the transfer portal to go to a better school, and then I'm going to enter it's like this, it's this really clear, if not somewhat, complex pathway to professional sports. Whereas surfing, it's kind of, as you pointed out, it's like, I can't rely on these events being here next year. I don't know if they're going to be here. And I wonder if that sort of instability at that time in your life played into the idea of like, maybe I should go to school instead.
Yeah, I think I've always been extremely academically driven, and that didn't come from anywhere but myself, because my parents were very, very flexible with what I wanted to do, and
interesting.
They never, they never were like on me to study or anything. It just, I told myself literally since I could remember getting grades, I think it was like first grade or something, like I was like, I'm gonna get straight A's for the rest of my life. And I just like made that commitment. Like I was quite like the perfectionist. Like if one thing in my room moved at the time, I'd be like, oh, somebody was in here, like I had, I was a little OCD maybe, but yeah, I had both. So like I was really, really into like physical activity and athleticism and doing sports, but I also was like super into the brain. Like I was like, I want to be like, and that kind of plays into maybe like from a young age, I was always wanting to be a superhero, wanting to have superpowers. And so I realized like kind of both of them were very important. And yeah, I thought deeply about like, I always wanted to go to college. I knew I wanted to like get the highest level education I probably could. And at the time I was like, maybe I could do surfing and still have my degree. Like as a back pocket thing, I knew a lot of athletes, and a lot of my friends actually, took the route of just going straight into the professional sport. Like, I don't know, local from here, Noah Collins, I grew up with, he's doing pretty well. And my friend Mason Silva, like he's a skater, he just is killing it right now. And so those two guys really inspired me growing up, because they were like doing homeschooling in high school and like just pursuing the sport, and they made it. So I'm like super proud of them. And having friends like Vanita Walsh, she was like an old Roxy girl. She used to do stand-up paddle and all that kind of stuff. She also like did homeschooling and pursued her sport and made a killing. So I was really inspired by them, but then I also knew like in my gut, like I really wanted to have that back pocket degree, like for any reason. Like I felt like I needed that confidence because I wasn't raised with the sport. So I didn't feel super confident like in myself, to be completely honest. And so like to have like a degree in my back pocket and then be like, okay, yeah, like I'm just going to do this for fun from my heart. And like, I want to be the best I can. That's what gave me the confidence to move forward, I think.
That it's an interesting tension you bring up too, right? Because it harkens back to what you're talking about when you were like, well, I'm in Japan, I'm sponsored, but I'm also working for the company. And when that balance of I need to surf more gets outweighed by no, they want me to work more, it becomes like a inflection point in a lot of ways, right? And as someone who didn't grow up surfing and didn't have kind of the dynastic, my father and my father's father and blah, blah, my mom, everyone surfed, and I've been sponsored since I was 5, and I have this pathway before me, coming to it when you did, and then also going to UC Berkeley, which is not impossible to go surfing from, of course, but is not kind of in the mix. It's not, snapper rocks. It's not lower trestles. It's not these waves where you're going to surf every day and you're going to surf at a high level. That tension's a hard one to walk when it's like, I feel like I need to be surfing every day to get better, as opposed to, no, I actually need to balance it out with something different in my life.
Yeah. And that was you know, even graduating from Berkeley was like one of the toughest decisions, like having that pressure. Like all my friends, like they were locked up with their jobs, like great jobs, great companies the year before we graduated, you know? And I'm spending like the year before we graduated, the summer, not interning, but living in Japan, like surfing every day on the countryside. And, you know, when I'm graduating, I would speak to a lot of the parents because we would throw surf team parties, and, you know, I was like the founder president. So I would make sure, you know, I say hi to everybody, and they'll say, what are you doing next? Because I had like built this like great community at Berkeley from nothing, which was, you know, it was great. I felt really good, like in my heart, and like everything I felt very proud of myself for that. And, you know, when the parents are asking like, hey, what's your next move? And I was like, I don't know, I'm going to go surf in Japan and we'll see what happens. Like they're just, you know, their faces would drop. And it was really tough to see that, because it was like, oh, what a waste. Like this girl just got her degree from Berkeley and she's just going to go surf in Japan. And I remember crying and having like such a hard time. Thank God my parents were like, you know what, they just don't understand what you're doing. And it's not the typical route, but like just look at it as your master's degree in Japanese language and culture. And I'm like, cool,
right.
That's a really cool way. And he's like, and the surfing thing's a bonus on the side. Like you can just enjoy your surf and like do the thing you love. And like, that'll get you to meet people, that'll get you to move around. And I was like, yeah, you're right. And like my friends, you know, were very supportive of me. But I remember that was one of like the toughest decisions to make, because it's like, do I sign with Goldman Sachs or do I go and do my own thing? So, yeah.
I was going to say, it's so interesting to hear, because you're so young and you already kind of recognize the wisdom in that. But like, you hear this all the time from really accomplished people where, you know, they often get asked the question of like, well, what would you tell your younger self? And so consistently, the answer is, I would tell them not to worry as much. You know, whatever is going to happen is going to happen, and it's going to work out. But it's, all of them have, like, and myself included, have that visceral moment or visceral memory of being in the moment, freaking out. You know, like it's such a radical thing being a college student and, you know, living month to month where like, I got to pay my rent, I got to pay my tuition, I got to work here to get some books, I need beer money, whatever it is.
Yeah, totally.
And then as you said, like, especially like, I had roommates that were in sort of the business college at UCSB, and they're getting their job offers, you know, October before everyone graduates in June. And it's like, I'm going to be going to work for PwC or Goldman Sachs or whatever. And they're offering me this much. And when you're that age, you're like, and you're in that situation, you're like, that's more money than I've ever heard of in my entire life. And it's so stressful. They're like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm going to go back and work at the surf shop. I'm screwed, you know? Yeah. And then it's like, you know, you wait a few years and you stay in touch with these people, and I'm not saying one decision's good or not, but you look through the prism of hindsight and you're like, no, I didn't need to freak out that much, you know, because it's like that wasn't as much money as I thought it was. And also that's not the life I wanted to live, and whatever it is. And everyone kind of has that adjustment. And I say that now, I'm going to be 40 in a couple months here. I'm sure when I'm 50, 60, I'll look back and be like, what were you worried about? Like at 40, you know, like it's all, you're gonna do what you're gonna do, and you're gonna experience what you're gonna experience, and it's all gonna be the right thing, whether it's hard or not. So
yeah, totally. And so I was fortunate to learn that from a young age, just because I've had some moments in life where it's been, you know, actually life threatening, and it kind of snaps you out of it, and you're kind of like, okay, like what, like only today matters. Like let's just flow through and enjoy like every moment. Like I don't want to waste more time worrying about things that don't even exist, you know. So
Of course. Now, I mean, I was going to say, like, you're still so young, so we've covered so much of your life already, and I don't want to go super deep because I know that the show is going to cover so much of that. But is there anything else that you can talk to us about the show, like whether it's kind of behind the scenes stuff on Chasing Waves or things that maybe didn't quite make it into the actual show that were just interesting in terms of the experience you had? So close to kind of after graduating college, having had your kind of competitive experiences you've had.
Totally. So it was really interesting because we shot the show mid-COVID, like all throughout COVID. Nobody could get in or really out of Japan unless you were a Japanese national. So I was fortunate to kind of bounce around, but the main production crew and everybody was stuck here in LA. So what had to happen was they had a remote crew, and they were literally like on the phone with the crew, like moving them around on that side. And it was really interesting because I love them to death, and I made some great connections with the crew out there. But they weren't really surfers, so to say. We had one guy, his name's Jet Akira, and he's a pretty big surf filmer out there, but everyone else like didn't really even know anything about the sport. So, we'd have a lot of shoots where they might miss some waves, or they didn't really understand how it works, or like how the etiquette works in how you act on the beach, or how you have to come up, so, or what you can shoot. Like in Japan, they're very, very protective about, like, we shot in one of my hometowns, and it's, probably one of the most protected spots in Japan. And they're very, very particular about what kind of shot, as you would know, what kind of shots that you're allowed to put. No wide pans, none, only like the wave and the surfer, like as little information as possible they want out there. And we've actually had incidences where we were shooting this one day and it was freaking firing, like just macking all time A-frame barrels. Like I was just so hyped. I couldn't believe it. And I was like, I can't believe this is our shooting day, just because there's so much bureaucracy involved with shooting this. You had to plan the day like weeks in advance. So you don't know if the waves are going to be good that day, but you're shooting no matter what, because all the paperwork that goes involved in the permitting. And so I was like, wow, like how blessed am I? We got the best day like for this show. And I'm like thinking I'm getting like the best barrels of my life. And I'm like, yeah, like it's going to be on film. And I look up and I see the producer and the cameraman just like this, like bowing their heads, getting just screamed at like by this man on the beach. Like, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I've been surfing for like an hour and a half, and like these guys have been yelled at for like the past hour. And so I come out, and my friend, she runs up to me. She's a local woman, and she was like, Sarah, like you need to stay right here. Like stay right here. It's not really safe for you. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, is everything okay? And it's like, yeah, that guy is actually like part of the gang, like, and like the Japanese mafia, and he's like screaming at like your producer, so just stay away. And I was like, whoa, this is like seriously intense. And then long story short, the big boss comes from that spot, the guy who's like the top local, and he like starts screaming at the dude that was screaming at our crew. And then he comes up and gets, Sarah, come here. He's like, you're totally fine. Go back out. So that day I didn't eat a single thing. I ended up surfing, I think, for like 8 hours or 9 hours total, because the first hour and a half was a bust. And then we surfed 2 sessions after for like as long as I could. And I just remember thinking like, wow, this is something that like is a scary but crazy experience. Like they're really out there. There's people out there that are like dangerous, but like also like how honored, how blessed am I to be able to shoot at this spot that's like so protected, and they trusted me and let me do it, which was another huge blessing. So I'm super grateful for that.
Oh yeah, there's always a bigger fish, right? Like you're like, oh, there's always someone else that's gonna come in, and yeah.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, they're all laughing, like, oh yeah, and I'm just like in my head, I'm thinking, why'd you do that then, dude? Like, come on.
Oh man, and so if that, I cannot wait to see whatever makes the episodes, but that sounds like an amazing experience, and getting those kind of waves in Japan sounds just totally incredible. We're going to take one more break to get a word in from our sponsors, and we'll be right back. So as we mentioned, this episode's going to drop a few days after Chasing Waves drops on Disney Plus, so we probably wouldn't have been able to book you next week. You'd be too busy, too high level, too hard to get to.
Never.
What are you, what are you doing with yourselves these days outside of, you're working on this project, you've graduated, you've got this global experience, you're a very high level surfer. What are your 2023 plans?
So it's super interesting. I'm like kind of in a transitional phase right now. I was just kind of talking to Miguel about that earlier. I'm like choosing between like entrepreneurial ventures, continuing the professional surfing, and hopefully maybe qualifying for 2024 Olympics, and then thinking about maybe like career orientated real job things to get more experience. The last one I think is definitely on the back burner. I'm trying to keep that one out as long as I can. I'm super passionate. I've been working a lot with some nonprofit organizations about, I worked with one called Very 50 in Japan, and it's very focused on social entrepreneurship. And then I've been working with the board riders here just locally. And I kind of want to start something that in the social entrepreneurship realm, so to speak. And so I've got one of my best buddies. We've been kind of like building business models in terms of like starting our own venture. So that's kind of in the works, and it's a long, complicated thing, but it would be around beach community. It would be around culture, clothes, and kind of like almost consulting. So we have like all these little aspects of what we want to build, and hopefully that will come to fruition sometime this year. And then in terms of the surf, like I'm training every day still. I just started working with this amazing trainer, Jennifer Palucci, at Chess Fitness. She's here in the South Bay, and she's been helping me with like just fine tuning every single tiny muscle in my body to make it the best it could be for the sport. So I'm super grateful for her. So I'm kind of like still pursuing like the two like continuously, but in the back of my mind, I've always really, really had the goal of being Japan's first female free surfer. It's been a really big dream of mine. I love competing, and I love competitive surfing, but at the end of the day, towards the end, I started to feel really stressed, during the process. And, I'm all about like really coming from the heart and like feeling like I really want to do something and doing that instead of like forcing it, like, because this is what other people think is best, or this is what I think is going to get me something else. Like, I'd rather just be honest with myself and see like what's the best fit for me. So it's been kind of a tough, like, I haven't even locked down the decision. I'm just making sure, like keeping both ends. But I really if I were to just be completely honest, I really just want to be like a female free surfer, like a figure in Japan, and kind of like move forward on the global edge and like do some, things for the communities and like help like make it like international for them, more accessible. That kind of stuff. That's kind of where my heart lies. I actually wanted to ask you, like, what do you think, like being like in my position, like I'm a new surfer, like in this industry. I have this thing coming out. I have my education. I have my experience. You've been in the industry for quite some time now. Like, what would you like kind of advise somebody like looking at somebody like me?
Well, that's an interesting question. As you were kind of going through that and talking about becoming Japan's first female free surfer, the thing that came to mind is sort of like a film that's been a touchstone for me a lot, which is Justin Gaines' Vonderjahr about Brendan Margison. And it really, it's a few years old now, but it's got Margot surfing, which is amazing. But it does tell this amazing story about how he became, one of the first kind of global free surfers that was paid pretty well. And there's this great comment in there from Wayne Bartholomew, who was the ASP president when I started 17, 18 years ago at this point. And he says this thing, he goes, it seems really dreamy to be a free surfer, but you have to be really, really good. You have to kind of answer the performance question to begin with, which is what, Brendan Margison did, or even looking forward, someone like a Dave Rostovich did. Like when they were younger, they had this competitive pedigree and just this performance pedigree that's not dissimilar to yours, where you've performed, you've won, you've done really, really well. And I think what you're getting into is the right idea in the sense of you're going to have this vehicle for mainstreaming your story through Disney Plus. you're going to have this platform and profile, you have this education, you have all these unique components to who you are as an individual. And I think if your surfing continues to mature and get better and better, and I don't think there's any reason why you wouldn't, because you're still so young, yeah, the sky is really the limit in a lot of ways too. And I think it's tricky, right? I think the industry has done so much to support surfing since its inception, a lot of times not necessarily through altruistic motives, like it's doing it to make a buck, but in a way that's also helping people get better as well. But I do think it's had a pretty narrow lens on what it defines as sort of like value-based surfing, right? In a lot of ways. And there's been kind of gatekeepers inside the industry that haven't necessarily operated from a place of objectivity historically. And that kind of goes back to what we were talking about, where it's like, what's the stable matriculation system for surfers compared to other sports? Well, it's pretty loose, right? Where it's like, maybe the world's best surfer is not someone that's in a jersey. I think for a lot of reasons, taking my WSL hat off for a second, that's probably been eradicated objectively over the last 15 or 20 years, where the best surfers on the planet are doing the best surfing in the live arena on the championship tour. But that's not to say that someone with a fantastic story can do that. And I'm rambling here a little bit, but I guess the point I'm getting to is that similar to probably the thesis behind Chasing Waves in terms of shining a light on the culture and community of surfing in Japan, like all these other cultures and communities around the world that have, surfers competing for world titles, like Japan should absolutely be there in terms of talent, and probably will be in a few years. And I think it's going to take individuals like those from the show, and even yourself, agnostic of what kind of career path you choose. And you're going to be, your shoulders are going to be what those people stand on in a lot of ways. And that's not to say you couldn't turn around and say, yeah, I'm going to commit to competing full time in 2024 and make the tour. Maybe you change your mind. But I think whatever you do and however you perform and however you express your surfing is only going to lend itself to younger generations coming up and saying, I want to do that and then do this. I want to do that and then that, even if they never compete. I think it's a rad thing to do. But sorry, that was a bit of a rant, but I appreciated the question in a lot of ways. Yeah.
No, I appreciate you. I mean, that's 17, 18 years of experience that, you've blessed me with. And I'm just so curious because, again, like I said, kind of in the beginning, I'm pretty new to this, yeah, I've been surfing for a while, but like in terms of being in the scene, like, no, I've been at school and I've been kind of in Japan and I've, this is kind of like my first time, like, being put out in the world in terms of my surfing. And so like, I don't even know, like, I love like any guidance I can get from anybody, like with experience. Like my parents don't know much about the industry. My dad knows about baseball, but it's a completely different world. So
totally. And I think like it's I think probably something that modern society doesn't do very well with, but certainly modern, the surfing community is like the idea of nuance, because I talk to so many people and they're either like so hardcore pro industry that they refuse to acknowledge that maybe it's imperfect, or they're so hardcore anti-establishment that they refuse to acknowledge that the industry does do quite a lot of really important things. And so I do think, in the sense of like, if you're partnering with a brand, even a small brand, there's a lot of value in that, where you don't have to take everything on yourself. Or if you're developing your own vehicle for that, like that's another thing entirely. I was recently listening to the Mark Maron, Colin Hanks podcast on what the fuck, whatever the podcast is. Anyway, and Colin Hanks was saying that when he was coming up, a lot of people that were in his situation of trying to be actors, and let's face it, not everyone's in the situation of being Tom Hanks's kid, but we'll put that off to the side. Mm-hmm. A lot of them had to kind of create their own opportunities, where it's like, I wrote the movie that I was going to star in, or I produced it, or what, because, I couldn't get through the gatekeepers. And so in the sense of you saying, I have this vision of becoming Japan's first female free surfer, a lot of it is probably going to be incumbent upon you to kind of create that opportunity. But I would also say that you could probably work with brands and media outlets and projects like Chasing Waves, where you don't have to shoulder everything yourself, because that becomes really unwieldy in a way.
Totally. I love that you said that, actually. Thanks, Dave. Like, to say, like, you know, I could create it myself, like, because, you know, I'm very entrepreneurial at heart, and like that's what I want to do. I started the surf team at Berkeley because they didn't have that community for me, and I had to create it myself. So I really want to like kind of rise above that, level that up, and like kind of do something international with that, and create my own community, create my own way, like ideally, you know, to help also like give opportunity and grow the sport and diversify it too. Like just make it like, I don't know, more worldwide than it is right now.
Fully. And I mean, it's interesting. And I think that's like a really potent lane to operate in, you know, because I do think like surfing is an idea. It has like, there's zero barriers to it in a lot of ways, you know, like it can be for anyone that has the bravery to kind of leave the safety of the shoreline and enter the ocean. And it should be, you know, and I think that a lot of institutions and structures and systems that get built on top of that have kind of created a gatekeeper mentality in a way, but the information age has sort of derailed all that because it's democratized voices in surfing, it's democratized content in surfing. And I mean, even to a certain extent, you know, the redesigns on the WSL side, like we're probably going to have the most diverse CT class in history. You know, we have for the first time, you know, an Indonesian in Rio Waida qualifying, or Moroccan in Ramsey Bukiam. You know, we have Brisa Hennessy from Costa Rica on the women's side, who's been very successful in recent years. So all those pockets exist. I think it's, and they're all as sort of potent and fertile as any other community out there. I just think that you're going to see a balancing out from what was sort of the strongholds in surfing across the world. And I think through projects like Chasing Waves and even kind of systems like the Pro Junior QS CSCT and what you've seen from Brazil in the last decade, like those are great. It's a great kind of balancing thing in surfing. And I think it's the more diverse it is, the more diverse the approaches are, the more diverse the backgrounds are, the better it is. Otherwise, you kind of get this weird insular polarization where people don't want to even kind of acknowledge someone else's perspective because they're kind of hardened in their own silos, which is no good.
Totally. Yeah, that's funny. I actually, you know, last year was actually my first year ever competing on the QS. So it was really fun. I had a super great experience, but you know, I was out there and I was thinking about, you know, I'm always thinking about how we could elevate this experience, how we can make it better, how we can, you know, like kind of like evolve it a little bit more. And I remember thinking in the Crewe event, I absolutely loved it because there were like the whole city came out and like just like made it like a huge parade. And I thought it was something super special. And I was like, wow, like, I didn't even realize like for QS competitions, like they could bring out the whole city and like make it like, I felt like I was almost on like a CT event, you know, and I really love that. And I was like, wow, like I hope it's like this for every QS. I'm not sure if it is, but like, because that really inspired me, you know, I was like, oh, as a new QS surfer, as somebody who hasn't really done this before, to see like all the local people come out and like make a party out of it and support and watch and be so excited about it. I was like, that makes me want to do another one. That makes me want to do it more. Like instead of like doing it somewhere where nobody shows up, you know, and it's just like you and your competitors and your, you know, their coaches or something.
I think you're totally right. And I mean, like I'm talking about gatekeepers, like surfing is something different to every single person that appreciates it, right? So I'm not saying that the way I enjoy it should be the way that everyone else enjoys it. But when I was coming up, like I grew up in suburban Orange County, like it was a window to something that was not that. You know, it was like I'd read the magazines, and whether it was a contest report or a travel report, whatever it was like, wow, you're getting exposed to a different country and a different community and different kind of people, different belief system, you know, a different way that they treat each other, whether it's relationships or religion or whatever. And it's just mind expanding in a way. And of course, surfing is so fun and that's great, but it's like, it's this activity that is a window to a broader world with a broader perspective. And I think from when I grew up through like kind of when I worked through the industry and started at the ASP back in 2006, the surfing industry and the media really became self-referential and insular in a lot of ways. And I don't think anyone did it intentionally. I think it just kind of became, social media hit and everyone was just sort of anonymous shit posting, and it became hyper-referential about and really insular. And it was a bummer because it's like, as you pointed out, like these events shouldn't just be people traveling from the bubble where they live and creating another bubble where they're going and being kind of bad tourists. Like, this is an opportunity for the people that live there to experience people from different parts of the world. This is an opportunity for people traveling there to actually experience that community. And I think that's something like so accessible and unique in surfing when it gets it right compared to other sports.
Yeah, I absolutely loved it. The energy was great. Like, it was something, it definitely, like, even thinking about it, I get super, like, I feel, my heart feels full. So I'm super grateful for that part of the whole competing side, for sure.
All right. Well, we'll keep an eye on where you end up here in 2023. But I like that it's open-minded. I like that you might be willing to go back and compete in Crewy or on the QS at some point, or you might just be putting down some video projects and being well on your way to becoming Japan's first free surfer. I'm really excited about that. But
Thanks, Dave.
We did put out some questions to the Instagram community at the Lineup Pod, and we got a good amount back, but we've whittled them down to 3 here. The first question is from Asa Tolm, who says first, your dad is a very good surfer. What surfing advice did he give you growing up?
Are you sure this isn't my dad?
I don't know. Some sort of. We just talked about anonymous accounts. Maybe he's like, oh, I'm gonna get in here.
He made one.
All
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, he's a decent surfer. I know back in the day, he says he was really, really good. I mean, there was no video or pictures back then, so we never know. But yeah, what was the question? Where did he learn?
What surfing advice did he give you growing up?
Oh, he gave me that advice that I'm going to go no matter what. That was his favorite line for me. He's like, if you choose a wave, just have that mentality, because if you don't have it, like, it's going to, like, you should have that with every wave. He's like, if you choose the wave, you're going to go no matter what. And it was more because of safety at first, I think he was saying, because if I kind of go half-ass with it and then another set comes behind and crashes me, he was really worried about that. But then it kind of turned into he really was pushing me to commit 100% always. And so I think that's one of the best advices he's ever given me.
It's good advice. Well, we'll see if that was your dad or not. We'll try to figure it out. But we have established you did confirm he is a good surfer, so at least that part's legit.
He's all right.
Good. Second question is from @manbackwards, who asks, how difficult was it to juggle going to school at Berkeley as well as being a sponsored surfer?
I think it was tough because the first 2 years I was very getting, immersed in the school. I joined a sorority, which is very different for me. It's not I don't seem like your sorority girl, but I was in one. I was starting the team. So I actually found myself surfing twice a month, to 3 times a month in that first year and a half-ish. And before, I didn't have a car at the time. I didn't have I was busy. And so that really broke me down. I remember being at the gym just crying and being something's wrong. And I realized it was because I wasn't surfing enough. And so after I got my bearings kind of going, I just committed to going at least once or twice a week. And then that started to, become weekend trips to Santa Cruz, and more opportunities came up to surf. And so it definitely wasn't easy. And, but I found ways to keep it up. And if I couldn't make it to the beach, I was swimming in the pool so I can just get wet and stay in shape. So
made it work.
Made it work.
Good,
yeah. Barely made it work,
question.
But stayed afloat. Yeah.
I like it, man. I like the honest answer too. Last question we have is actually from a world champion. So look at that. Soleil Erico asks, what is surfing like in Japan compared to surfing everywhere else, which you've touched on a little bit, but maybe what were some of the biggest points of differences in surfing in Japan compared to wherever else you've surfed?
Soleil's one of my best friends. Thank you very much for asking this
question. So we have your dad's fake account. We've got your best friend world champ.
This is rigged. So, Japan surfing is really interesting. I think it's really different because the hierarchical society there is different. So, they're basing on age as the rank versus skill. And so, the older you are in the community, like the more priority you have. And as we know, as you get older, we have with some like 67-year-old, 7-year-old surfers out there, they're not surfing as good as, maybe the younger kids. And so it's this weird battle between like respect, where the younger kids want to get better. You want them to get better waves and like progress, yet they're not able to because they have this cap of like this older crew that just dominates the peak. And so I thought that was like the main difference for me just going there and being here, because usually here, if you're a great surfer, you're respected and, you show respect, that pretty much you can get some waves. But like out there, it definitely is more based on the age and like, oh, I was born here and I was here forever. And even though somebody had been living there for 20 years, it wasn't good enough, because they're not born there. So it's very interesting in that way. I definitely think though, like the waves in Japan are still like hidden gems for the most part. Versus like I feel like the best spots in America are pretty much known. So it's almost like I always say it's like a little secret escape to go to Japan and find those spots. And once you do and you get rooted to the community and it takes a lot of time, but once you gain their trust, they've got your back. And I really, really appreciate that too. So
very cool. Well, thank you to everyone that wrote in at the lineup pod. We're now down to our final segment. It's time for the lightning round. So these are 10 questions for you to answer as quickly as you can.
Wait, one word answers?
No. Long answers is fine. Just go as quick as you can. If you could only have one board set up for the rest of your life, single fin, twin fin, thruster, quad bonzer, or finless, which would you choose?
Thruster.
Coffee or tea?
Tea.
Burrito or pizza?
Burrito.
Last book you read?
I don't read. I'm just kidding. No, I'm not. I'm not kidding. The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Okay, great one. Best surf film ever?
I really love You from a Blue Moon. John.
What is one wave you never have to go back to?
Probably. Well, I have to go back, but if I could choose, probably like Chirashita, the Olympic venue.
There you go. If you only get to surf one wave for the rest of your life?
That would be my home break in Kochi, Japan.
Best person to share a lineup with?
Soleil Erco.
Worst person to share a lineup with?
Mahina Maeda. I'm joking.
I appreciate how quick those answers happen. That's good. Last one. Finish the sentence. I will next achieve a state of happiness by
trusting myself, being present, and moving back from the heart.
I love it. Sara Kohrogi, thank you so much for coming on the lineup. Congratulations on your career so far. Congratulations on Chasing Waves that will be streaming on Disney Plus by the time this comes out. Everyone should go check it out, and can't wait to see what you do next.
Thanks so much, Dave. I'm stoked to be here. Phew.